So you've been coaching someone for a bit in a coaching session. They're learning some good things about themselves, about their situation, about the problem they're trying to solve or the thing they're trying to get to through the coaching. Now what? Now we begin looking at action, planning, goal setting, doing something with all of the awareness that's being generated, taking the learning and making it practical, applying it to their lives. The final 3 competencies from the International Coach Federation, out of the 11, you have 9, 10, and 11, which are now kind of being rolled into a single competency that's combining the ability for a coach to design actions or co-create actions with the client, to be able to do planning and goal setting, and as well as to design accountability structures to help support a client in following through with the actions and plans that they set up in their coaching. How do you keep following through as you're done with the coaching? So these things, designing actions, designing plans and goals, and designing accountability, they are the final competency, even though it's competencies 9 through 11. And they have, again, some markers of success that we'll go over with our conversation today. Number 1, and I'd say this is probably one of the most important in terms of the overall experience of a coaching session. As we've seen in the coaching session structure, you start with agenda setting. It may be some small talk at the beginning, but oftentimes the coaching is really kicking off with agenda setting or setting up the coaching agreement. Part of that is the measurable result that the person would like by the end of the coaching session, the outcome, the target that we're going to shoot for in the session. As things begin, the coach is partnering with the client throughout the experience, asking relevant questions, using the client's language, and reflecting together on the situation, the client, all these good things. During an entire session, you're going to have maybe, let's say, 20 questions in a 30 to 45-minute session. During that time, every 5 questions or 7 questions or so, the coach should pause and check in and do a progress check of, we've gone so far down this path, where would you like to take things now? Or how close are we right now in terms of what you wanted out of the session a day? With that in mind, where would you like to go next? These overall progress check-ins are very key to each individual session, as well as an overall coaching agreement. We want to make sure to spend some time from time to time refreshing the progress the client has made towards their arrangement, their relationship arrangement and engagement with the coach. But this progress check-in is a core part of every coaching session. And while this is something that's not necessarily expected until PCC standard and master level standard to do it even more, I say begin with the right habits right off the bat, right as you get into training. Make sure you are checking in during a 30-minute to 45-minute session. At least check in 2 times after the agenda is set. How are we tracking? How are we doing? Where should we go next? Do that at least 2 times. And that's going to build a very good habit, and it's going to continue to demonstrate a partnership and a true sense that the coach is relying on the client for where to go. Now, why is this related to actions, planning, goal setting, and accountability? How it's related is the coach is not the best judge of when we should begin moving towards action. We might have a good sense, we might have a good idea, and we may even ask questions like, so based on the learning you have right now, what would you want to do with that? Or what's an action you might take? But the client is going to be the best person most of the time to determine if they want to keep exploring or if they want to move towards creating an action or plan for what they do after the coaching session. So it's important to check in to see if we need to continue to dig and explore or to begin to apply and create action steps. Now, looking at marker number 2, we need to begin looking at taking the awareness a client is creating and learning throughout a coaching session and begin pivoting it to possible actions and experiments, things that they can begin doing past the coaching session or even thinking past the coaching session to utilize the learning that they have from the conversation. So that's the marker number 2. taking the awareness and checking with the client on what possible actions or thinking they might like to do beyond the coaching to make sure they're moving forward beyond just talking about things. Now, part of that is to help them voice just their initial intentions. I would, now that I've really talked this through, I would like to go to the gym 3 times this next week. I would really like to have that conversation with my manager. I really need to do that. These are called intentions, and they are the beginnings of action steps. But it is not an action plan. And so that's the second part of these 3 competencies put together of 9, 10, and 11. We want to help this person take intentions and make them into true action plans and structures and systems that will help them follow through. And if you're in the coaching space, you'll probably be very familiar with SMART goals, and we'll talk about SMART action steps as a framework to creating action plans. And that's the idea. Marker number 3 with competencies 9 through 11 is helping the client go from that intention to creating a path, a plan for following through on the intention. Okay, great. If you're going to go to the gym these next 3 times this next week, what's going to be your reminder to do that? How do you want to remember to, or what do you need to have in place in order to be ready each day to make that happen? Which days would you like to do this? And how long would you want to be at the gym for each of those times? You want to flesh out some of the details around an action step so that it becomes more well thought out and more actionable. If it's just an intention, those things like, I need to have that conversation with my manager, it's easily forgettable. But if they say, I want to have that conversation with my manager, I'm going to make sure to ask for a time to book on their calendar with their executive assistant. I'm going to talk to them tomorrow and shoot to have the conversation next week based on what availability is on their calendar. And I'm going to put it in my calendar to remind me to talk to the executive assistant at this time tomorrow. All of these things help create a path, a plan to follow instead of just an intention. Now, we need to maybe take it one extra step, and that's co-designing accountability, marker number 4. While the plan often will contain accountability, it's very important for the coach to check in how this person wants to hold themselves accountable. Early on in the coaching process, I think many coaches get the sense that they are meant to be accountability partners for their clients, but that is not necessarily true. Coaches are paid to be accountability designers with the clients. So sometimes this does mean that the coach is going to help hold the client accountable on a certain goal, sending them 2 messages over the next week. And then other times, the coach is going to allow the client to design all of their accountability on their own, maybe utilizing a system like a calendar and a reminder system or something like that on their phone or sticky notes or whatever is most effective for this individual. Or they will reach out to certain other people, friends and family members, coworkers, to help hold them accountable. Or maybe they'll go talk to their manager about this intention, this action plan, that they want to have this done, this project done by a certain date. And now there's an accountability put into place that is not relying on the coach. And that's really where more success is happening. At a lower level and competency level of a coach, coaches are expected to sometimes fall into more of a parental type of accountability structure. But as a coach grows, that's not the kind of accountability we want to have. And that's also, that's not what we want to train towards. Ideally, the coach is not taking it upon him or herself to be the accountability partner, but helping the client voice how they want to hold themselves accountable to whatever goal or action they set for themselves. It all gets to that idea of when we're done hanging up the phone, turning off the video, heading out of the office for after the last coaching session, this person is going to continue to follow through on their intentions even without the coach. And that way, working ourselves out of a job, at least in certain domains, of their life and development. And then we begin to wrap up the session. Now, at least wrapping up a portion of the session, once a client has made an action plan, some accountability, it's important for the coach to not assume anything. A couple of different things can happen. From this point, we might be 20 minutes into a 45-minute session. The coach shouldn't say, oh, we've got more time, let's look at this other thing. But the coach shouldn't also just blanket say, well, I guess that's it for us today, let's head out. That's not a decision the coach gets to make, unless, of course, we're running out of time and we legitimately have to wrap up. The coach needs to call the game, so to speak, at that point. But again, in this scenario of 20 minutes into a 45-minute session, the client's moved very fast. They've got a great idea. They've got a plan. They've got an accountability process. They're all set. Well, now it's the coach's turn to ask a question or offer an observation. Hey, client, good work on getting to this point. It's amazing. It's only 20 minutes in, and you've done so much work already. Would you like to keep exploring this topic and make the plan even more robust? Would you like to look at something else, or are we done here today? And those shouldn't be in any particular order. It's not that we are done here today is the right answer. It's just any of those. But the client needs to make the decision of, do they want to keep working today, or do they want to go ahead and hang up and begin acting on their intention? Sometimes they begin doing the action plan during the time slot that the rest of the coaching session filled. This is a big reason why we shouldn't charge if we're doing direct pay coaching. We shouldn't charge by the minute. Instead, we should charge by the slot, because the value of coaching is not focused on the minutes that pass, but the progress a person makes, whether that progress happens in 20 minutes or an hour. That's where the value is. And honestly, if an hour-long session comes to a conclusion in 20 minutes and it's excellent value for the client, they tend to be really happy that it's a shorter experience and they get started on following through. But the coach needs to make sure to partner with the client. Is this a good time for us to wrap up, or would you like to look at some other part of the agenda, the big agenda that we're working on, or do you want to keep fleshing out this plan? What would you like to do from here, client? That's the client's decision, not the coach's. Finally, and this is another one of these overlapping markers. This one overlaps with trust and intimacy, where the coach needs to acknowledge the work that the client is doing. So marker number 6 of success with action planning, goal setting. This person's making progress with their lives, not just in the session, but in terms of their creating an expectation for themselves of what they're going to be doing after a coaching session. The coach needs to take some time and say, wow, good work. This is a very thorough plan. I'm excited for you. It sounds like you are all set. Honestly, thank you for the effort you've put into this coaching session. Makes it a lot more fun when someone's following through like you do. Say it. Say something that acknowledges the effort the client is putting in within the session and also as they wrap up the session. Now, finally, one last bit on progress, action, planning, goal setting, accountability. I like to highlight that within a coaching agreement as a whole, a relationship agreement, or a coaching agreement for an individual session, the idea of doing something, an action or an experiment or a plan, these are not the point of a coaching session. The point of a coaching session is to create opportunities for a person to develop, to transform, to grow. So the reason they're going to do this action might be around trying to resolve a problem or have a breakthrough with the situation they're in. But at the end of the day, we want them to feel like they are growing in their ability to address these kinds of issues. We are not problem solvers with the client. We are helping the client become a better problem solver in themselves. So just keep in mind, it's often a good thing to take a little bit extra time at the end of a session to say, now that we have all this in place, what are your main takeaways? What are you learning about yourself now that you have this plan? What are you most looking forward to learning? as you follow through with these actions. And sometimes, like marker number 2 says, sometimes the action is actually, I'm going to spend some good time thinking through this many hours over the next week. Spend some time thinking through blank, maybe what the priorities are around the degree I'm going to pursue, or the like the company I'm looking for as I make a transition, or the words I want to use as I speak to my manager. I'm going to do some thinking. But whether the action is something they're going to be doing or something they're going to be thinking, the coach needs to highlight how they are learning and growing through the process. That's really the point of coaching, that the client is growing, not only solving problems. Another great thing to be practicing: how do you land the plane and wrap up a coaching session? We'll begin looking at some extra details around action planning, goal setting, accountability with some other videos. Hope this is helpful. Get the practice in, get some feedback, and keep coaching. Thank you.